Ladies and gentlemen, imagine standing on a vast plain where the horizon stretches endlessly and the only sound you hear is the wind rushing through the open land. This is a reality in one of the most sparsely populated places on Earth, a land where 97.3% of its territory remains unoccupied by permanent settlements. But why is this the case? The answer lies in a perfect combination of geography, history, and culture. This land is immense, yet its population remains relatively small. One of the main reasons is its harsh climate. Winters here can be brutally cold, with temperatures plunging well below freezing, making it difficult for large populations to thrive. At the same time, summers bring intense heat in certain regions, creating a challenging environment for agriculture and habitation. But beyond the weather, the people of this land have followed a unique way of life for centuries. Unlike other nations that developed dense cities, this country has a deep-rooted tradition of nomadic living. Families travel vast distances, herding animals and moving with the seasons, rather than settling in one place permanently. This lifestyle requires open spaces, which have remained largely untouched by urbanization. Geographically, much of the land consists of steppes, mountains, and deserts, areas not easily transformed into bustling cities. Limited infrastructure and economic opportunities outside of a few key urban centers further discourage people from spreading out across the land. Instead, the majority of the population is concentrated in just one major city, leaving the rest of the country open and empty. However, this emptiness is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of strength. It allows nature to thrive, with vast landscapes remaining unspoiled. It preserves a way of life that has existed for generations, keeping cultural traditions alive. And it offers a sense of freedom rarely found in other parts of the world. So, while many nations struggle with overcrowding and overdevelopment, this land remains a place where the sky stretches wide, the land breathes freely, and the people embrace a unique balance between nature and civilization. When we look at a map, we often associate large land masses with large populations. However, this is not always the case. Despite covering an area of over 1.5 million square kilometers, this country remains one of the least densely populated places on Earth. To put this into perspective, its land area is roughly the same as several European nations combined, yet its population is only a fraction of theirs. But why does such a vast land remain so sparsely populated? The answer lies in a combination of geography, history, and lifestyle. Unlike countries that developed around river valleys, coastal areas, or fertile plains, this land consists of vast stretches of steppe, desert, and mountain ranges. These geographical features have naturally limited large-scale human settlement. Population distribution here is highly uneven. The capital city is home to a significant portion of the entire population, while the rest of the country remains largely empty. In contrast to urbanized nations where infrastructure connects towns and cities in a dense network, here, settlements are spread far apart, sometimes separated by hundreds of kilometers. A journey between two towns can take hours or even days, highlighting just how much of the country remains uninhabited. Another key factor is the traditional nomadic lifestyle, which historically discouraged permanent settlement. Unlike societies that built large, fixed cities, the people of this land have long relied on herding livestock across open spaces, moving from place to place with the seasons. This way of life, which has existed for centuries, means that people are not tied to one location, and as a result, no single region has become densely populated. Even today, despite modernization, many families continue to live in traditional portable dwellings, moving as necessary to find fresh grazing land for their animals. Furthermore, the economy plays a role in keeping the population low outside urban centers. Many people migrate to the capital or a few select towns in search of better opportunities, leaving vast rural areas with only small, scattered communities. Industries such as mining and agriculture exist, but they do not require large labor forces spread across the countryside. Unlike industrialized nations where factories, farms, and businesses create population clusters, the economic structure here does not demand high levels of urbanization. Thus, Despite its enormous size, this land remains one of the least populated places on Earth. It is a place where open skies stretch endlessly, where nature dominates the horizon, and where the few people who do live here embrace the vastness of their homeland rather than feeling the need to fill it with concrete and steel. One of the biggest reasons why so much of this land remains uninhabited is the extreme and unpredictable climate. Unlike temperate regions where seasons bring mild transitions, this country experiences some of the most brutal weather conditions on Earth. Winters can be long and unforgiving, while summers can be harsh and dry, making it difficult for large populations to settle in many areas. The winter season is particularly challenging. Temperatures in some regions can drop as low as -40 degrees Celsius, -40 degrees Fahrenheit, or even lower, making everyday life a struggle. In these conditions, even basic activities like transportation, livestock herding, and maintaining a home become difficult. Water sources freeze, roads become impassable, and survival requires careful planning and resilience. The bitter cold can last for several months, often stretching from late autumn into early spring. The phenomenon known as dzud is an additional challenge. This is a severe winter that brings extreme cold, heavy snowfall, and ice, which can be devastating for herders. When a dzud strikes, animals struggle to find food beneath thick layers of snow, leading to mass livestock deaths, which in turn affects the livelihoods of thousands of families. Summers, in contrast, bring their own set of difficulties. While people might expect relief after the harsh winters, summers can be scorching, especially in desert and steppe regions. Temperatures can rise above 40 degrees Celsius, 104 degrees Fahrenheit, creating dry, arid conditions where water becomes scarce. The combination of extreme cold in the winter and excessive heat in the summer creates a climate of extremes, making it difficult for large-scale agriculture and permanent settlements to thrive. Another major climate-related challenge is the wind. Strong, relentless winds sweep across the vast, open landscapes, carrying dust and sand across great distances. This is especially noticeable in regions close to deserts, where dust storms can create visibility issues and even cause respiratory problems for those exposed to them. The wind also contributes to soil erosion, making it harder to cultivate crops. The unpredictability of the climate means that people must constantly adapt. Some years may bring moderate weather, while others bring severe cold snaps, scorching droughts, or devastating dzuds. This uncertainty discourages large-scale urbanization, as infrastructure must be built to withstand extreme conditions, which can be both expensive and difficult to maintain. Because of these climatic challenges, only certain areas of the country are suitable for year-round habitation. Most people choose to settle in places where natural features, such as rivers or sheltered valleys, offer some protection from the harsh elements. However, even in these regions, modern infrastructure struggles to keep up with the demands of the weather, further limiting large-scale settlement. This extreme climate has shaped not only the land, but also the people. Those who live here have developed remarkable resilience, adapting their way of life to withstand the coldest winters and the hottest summers. It is a land of survival, where nature dictates the rules, and only those who understand its challenges can thrive. One of the most defining aspects of this country is its deep-rooted nomadic culture. Unlike many other nations where people settled in permanent towns and cities, the people here have lived a mobile lifestyle for centuries, moving with the seasons in search of better pastures for their livestock. This way of life has played a significant role in shaping the country's population distribution, leaving vast areas uninhabited by permanent settlements. For many generations, families have relied on herding animals such as sheep, goats, yaks, horses, and camels. These animals provide food, clothing, and trade opportunities, making them essential to survival. However, the key to successful herding is movement. Herders must travel from place to place, following the availability of fresh grazing land and water sources. If they remained in one location for too long, the land would become overgrazed, making it impossible to sustain their livestock. This constant movement means that rather than establishing large towns, people have traditionally lived in portable homes that can be easily packed up and transported across the landscape. The most iconic symbol of this nomadic lifestyle is the traditional dwelling, a round, portable tent designed to withstand extreme weather conditions. Unlike permanent brick or wooden houses, these structures can be assembled and disassembled within hours, allowing families to relocate whenever necessary. This flexibility has allowed nomadic communities to thrive in an environment where survival depends on adaptability. Over time, urbanization and modernization have led many to settle in cities, but a significant portion of the population still maintains a semi-nomadic or fully nomadic way of life. Even those who have moved to towns often return to the countryside during certain seasons to take care of their livestock. This ongoing connection to nomadism means that vast regions of the country remain uninhabited for most of the year, only seeing temporary camps or seasonal movements of herders. Another reason why this culture has remained strong is that it is deeply embedded in the country's identity. Many traditions, festivals, and social customs revolve around the nomadic way of life. Horse riding, for example, is not just a sport but an essential skill passed down through generations. Children often learn to ride at a very young age, and horseback travel remains a practical way to move across the open landscapes. Festivals celebrate herding culture, with events like wrestling, archery, and horse racing showcasing skills that have been vital for survival in such an environment. Despite modern influences, nomadism continues to be a respected and preserved tradition. While many countries have seen their traditional ways of life disappear due to industrialization, this nation has managed to keep its nomadic heritage alive. Government policies have even supported the continuation of this way of life, recognizing its importance in maintaining cultural identity and environmental balance. The nomadic culture also influences land use. Since people move rather than settle permanently, there is little incentive to develop infrastructure in remote areas. Unlike agricultural societies that clear land for farming or build irrigation systems, herders rely on natural pastures, leaving much of the land untouched. This is another reason why large portions of the country remain empty. There is simply no need to build fixed structures when the land serves its purpose as grazing territory. Even today, with technology and modernization changing lifestyles worldwide, many people here still embrace the freedom and mobility of nomadic life. This cultural heritage has played a crucial role in keeping the land open and unoccupied, ensuring that the vast, sweeping landscapes remain just as they have for centuries. Geography plays a fundamental role in shaping how and where people live. In many countries, natural landscapes have encouraged dense settlements, with cities growing around fertile plains, river valleys, or coastal regions. However, this country's geography presents significant challenges that make large-scale urbanization difficult, leaving much of the land uninhabited. One of the most striking features of this country is its vast, open steppes. These grasslands stretch for thousands of kilometers, creating an almost endless horizon. While they are ideal for grazing livestock, they are less suited for large-scale agriculture. Unlike fertile farmlands in other parts of the world, the steppe soil is often thin and lacks the nutrients needed for intensive crop cultivation. Additionally, the region experiences low and unpredictable rainfall, making it difficult to sustain farming without advanced irrigation systems, which are costly and hard to maintain in such a vast area. Beyond the steppes, the country also has extensive desert regions, with the most famous being one of the largest deserts in the world. This desert alone covers a significant portion of the country's land area, creating an environment where few people can survive permanently. The extreme heat during the summer and the bitter cold during the winter make it one of the harshest places on Earth. Strong winds constantly shift the sand, making it difficult to build stable infrastructure, and water sources are scarce, further discouraging settlement. In contrast to the desert and steppe, the country also has large mountain ranges. These mountains create breathtaking landscapes, but also act as natural barriers to human habitation. The rugged terrain makes transportation difficult, limiting the development of roads and railways. Many of these high-altitude regions remain largely untouched, with only a few small communities scattered throughout. The extreme weather conditions in the mountains add another layer of difficulty. Long, snowy winters make survival challenging, while the steep slopes limit agricultural possibilities. Rivers and lakes are also relatively scarce in comparison to many other countries. While there are some significant rivers, they are not evenly distributed across the land. Many areas rely on underground water sources, which are not always accessible or sustainable for large populations. The lack of major waterways has historically limited trade and transportation, preventing the development of large urban centers far from existing water sources. Another key geographic challenge is the country's isolation from major global trade routes. Unlike nations with coastlines that allow easy access to international shipping, this country is completely landlocked, surrounded by other nations. This means that importing and exporting goods require long overland journeys, increasing costs and reducing economic incentives for large-scale industrial or commercial development in remote areas. Without a direct connection to major seaports, trade is more expensive, making economic expansion in rural regions less attractive. Furthermore, the combination of vast distances and low population density makes it difficult to build and maintain infrastructure such as roads, railways, and power lines. In many remote areas, the cost of building and maintaining infrastructure is simply too high compared to the number of people who would benefit from it. As a result, many regions remain disconnected from major urban centers, reinforcing their low population levels. Because of these geographic challenges, most of the country's population is concentrated in a few areas where conditions are more favorable for settlement. The capital city, for example, is located in a relatively sheltered valley with access to key resources, making it a natural hub for development. Meanwhile, much of the rest of the country remains open, wild, and untouched by large-scale human activity. History plays a crucial role in shaping the way societies develop, and in this country, historical factors have contributed significantly to its low population density. Unlike many nations that built large, permanent cities early in their history, the people here have followed a different path, one deeply connected to mobility, conquest, and adaptation to harsh environments. For centuries, this land has been home to nomadic civilizations rather than settled agricultural societies. Unlike regions where people gathered in large numbers to cultivate crops, build irrigation systems, and establish permanent towns, the people here relied on herding livestock and moving with the seasons. This way of life was not just a choice but a necessity, dictated by the geography and climate. Large cities require stable food sources, but in a land where extreme winters and arid summers make large-scale farming difficult, permanent urban centers were less practical. Instead, smaller, scattered settlements developed, supporting a mobile population that could survive by adapting to nature's cycles. One of the most defining moments in this country's history was the rise of a great empire that once controlled vast territories stretching across Asia and Europe. The success of this empire was largely due to the mobility of its people. Rather than building fixed cities, they relied on their ability to move quickly across the land, using horses to travel vast distances in a short time. Their military tactics and way of life were deeply tied to the open landscapes, where they could move freely without being restricted by walls or roads. This preference for mobility over urbanization influenced the way the population was distributed, reinforcing a culture that did not prioritize permanent settlements. Even after the decline of this empire, the region remained largely rural, with no major push toward urbanization. While some nations in Asia and Europe experienced rapid city building during the Middle Ages and Renaissance, this country maintained its nomadic traditions. Small trade centers existed, but they never grew into the massive cities seen in other parts of the world. The need for mobility, combined with the harsh environment, meant that people continued to spread out over vast areas rather than concentrating in one place. During later centuries, foreign influences began to shape the region, but even then, large-scale industrialization and urban expansion remained limited. Unlike nations that underwent early industrial revolutions, developing factories, railways, and dense urban centers, this country's economy remained centered around livestock and rural life. The introduction of modern technology and infrastructure was slow, and even when cities did start to grow, they were few in number, leaving most of the countryside untouched. Political and economic shifts in the 20th century did lead to some urban development, but even these efforts could not overcome the deep-rooted historical preference for open spaces and mobility. Policies that encouraged settlement and industrialization were met with mixed success, as many people continued to value their traditional way of life. While some migrated to urban centers for work or education, many still maintained strong ties to rural areas, ensuring that vast regions remained sparsely populated. Unlike other countries that saw continuous waves of urban expansion over centuries, this country's historical development was shaped by a different set of priorities, ones that valued movement, adaptability, and survival over the creation of permanent, densely populated settlements. This historical foundation continues to influence the population distribution today, leaving much of the land open and empty. Economics plays a major role in shaping where people live. In many countries, large cities grow around industries, trade hubs, and job opportunities, attracting dense populations over time. However, in this country, economic conditions have contributed to keeping vast areas empty. The economy has historically been based on livestock herding rather than industrial production or large-scale agriculture, which has naturally limited urbanization. Even today, economic opportunities remain concentrated in just a few areas, while the rest of the country remains sparsely populated. For much of history, this land's economy was centered on a nomadic, livestock-based system. Families survived by raising sheep, goats, yaks, camels, and horses, which provided food, clothing, and trade goods. Unlike farming societies that required permanent villages and labor-intensive cultivation, herding allowed people to move frequently, preventing the development of large towns. Since trade routes existed but did not require massive market centers, most settlements remained small, and there was little economic pressure to build dense cities. Even in more recent times, economic development has not significantly changed this pattern. While some industries have emerged, particularly in mining, they tend to be located in remote areas where workers live temporarily rather than permanently. Mining operations require specialized labor but do not create the kind of large, long-term urban centers seen in manufacturing-based economies. Many workers rotate in and out of mining sites, returning to urban areas after their shifts, rather than settling permanently in the countryside. This means that even in regions where valuable resources exist, permanent population centers have not emerged in large numbers. Agriculture, which has been a driving force of urbanization in many countries, has not developed extensively here. The harsh climate and challenging geography make it difficult to grow crops on a large scale. Only a small portion of the land is suitable for farming, and even in those areas, productivity is limited by unpredictable weather conditions. Without a strong agricultural base to support large settlements, rural areas have remained mostly empty, with only small clusters of people engaged in farming. Another economic challenge is infrastructure development. In many nations, highways, railways, and ports create strong economic networks that support the growth of towns and cities. However, in this country, the vast distances and difficult terrain make infrastructure projects expensive and difficult to maintain. Roads often stretch for hundreds of kilometers between towns, and in some areas, they are not paved or are impassable during certain seasons. Without reliable infrastructure, businesses struggle to expand beyond major urban centers, keeping most economic activity concentrated in just a few locations. The country's landlocked status also adds to its economic limitations. Nations with coastlines benefit from easy access to global trade, with ports allowing for the quick import and export of goods. Here, however, goods must be transported long distances overland, increasing costs and reducing competitiveness in global markets. This makes it harder for industries to develop in remote areas, as transporting raw materials and finished products is both expensive and time-consuming. As a result, economic growth remains centered around a few key cities, while the rest of the country remains largely undeveloped. In addition to these structural challenges, employment opportunities remain limited outside of urban areas. In many countries, rural populations move to cities in search of better jobs, but here, that process has been even more pronounced. With few industries offering stable, well-paying jobs in the countryside, many people choose to migrate to the capital or other urban centers, leaving behind vast empty spaces. As the younger generation moves away in search of education and employment, rural areas become even more depopulated, reinforcing the cycle of emptiness. Government efforts to diversify the economy have faced challenges as well. While investments in industries like tourism, energy, and manufacturing have been made, they have not yet led to widespread population redistribution. Tourism, for example, is seasonal and concentrated in specific areas, meaning that it does not create year-round job opportunities in most parts of the country. Similarly, energy projects, such as hydroelectric or renewable energy developments, require land but do not necessarily bring large numbers of permanent infrastructure is the backbone of modern civilization, allowing economies to grow, businesses to operate, and people to settle in previously inhospitable areas. In many countries, dense networks of roads, railways, power lines, and communication systems have enabled cities and towns to flourish. However, in this country, the lack of extensive infrastructure has played a major role in keeping vast areas uninhabited. With limited roads, unreliable transportation networks, and uneven access to essential services, much of the land remains empty, reinforcing the country's low population density. One of the most significant infrastructure challenges is transportation. Unlike nations where highways and railroads connect almost every region, this country has large expanses of land with little or no developed road systems. Many rural areas rely on unpaved roads, which become impassable during harsh weather conditions. In winter, heavy snowfall and extreme cold make travel dangerous, while in summer, heavy rains can wash out roads, turning them into muddy, inaccessible paths. This lack of reliable roadways discourages settlement outside of established urban areas, as people prefer to live where transportation is more predictable and convenient. Rail transport is also underdeveloped in comparison to other large nations. While railways exist, they are primarily concentrated around a few key routes, leaving much of the countryside without access to train services. In other countries, rail networks have allowed goods and people to move efficiently, promoting urbanization and economic development. Here, however, the limited railway system means that businesses and individuals must rely on costly and less reliable transportation methods, further discouraging the spread of population into rural areas. Access to electricity and clean water is another major factor that influences settlement patterns. In the capital and a few major towns, modern utilities are available, but in more remote areas, electricity supply can be inconsistent or entirely unavailable. Many people in the countryside rely on solar panels, small generators, or traditional fuel sources, which limits industrial development and modern living standards. Without reliable electricity, businesses struggle to operate, and families are less likely to settle permanently in remote regions. Similarly, clean water access remains a challenge in many parts of the country, as the infrastructure required to supply water to widely dispersed populations is expensive and difficult to maintain. Telecommunications infrastructure is also unevenly distributed. While internet and mobile phone coverage have improved in recent years, there are still large regions where connectivity is weak or non-existent. In a world where digital communication is essential for education, healthcare, and business, the lack of reliable internet and phone service makes it difficult for people in rural areas to access the same opportunities as those in cities. This digital divide further encourages migration to urban centers, leaving rural areas sparsely populated. Healthcare infrastructure is another major concern. Large, well-equipped hospitals are mostly located in the capital and a few other cities, while rural areas often rely on small clinics with limited resources. In emergency situations, people in remote regions may have to travel hundreds of kilometers to receive medical attention, making life in these areas riskier. The difficulty in accessing healthcare discourages people from settling in rural regions, as they prefer to live where medical services are readily available. Educational institutions follow a similar pattern. While major cities have universities, technical schools, and well-equipped primary and secondary schools, many rural areas have only small schools with limited facilities. This lack of access to quality education forces many families to move to urban centers, further reducing the rural population. Even those who grow up in the countryside often leave for higher education and do not return, leading to a continuous cycle of urban migration. Government efforts to improve infrastructure have faced challenges due to the country's vast size and difficult geography. Constructing and maintaining roads, railways, and utility networks across such an expansive landmass requires significant investment, and the low population density makes some projects economically unfeasible. Unlike densely populated countries where infrastructure development benefits millions of people in a concentrated area, projects here must cover long distances to serve relatively small populations, making them costly and difficult to justify. In some regions, nomadic lifestyles further complicate infrastructure planning. Unlike settled populations, nomadic communities move seasonally, making it difficult to design long-term infrastructure projects that meet their needs. Fixed power grids, permanent water supply systems, and road networks are less useful to people who do not remain in one place for extended periods. As a result, much of the country remains undeveloped, reinforcing the cycle of low population density and limited infrastructure expansion. In many parts of the world, urban expansion and industrial development have led to deforestation, pollution, and the destruction of natural ecosystems. However, in this country, environmental conservation and traditional land use practices have played a significant role in keeping much of the land uninhabited. The relationship between humans and nature has been shaped by centuries of nomadic traditions, government policies, and a recognition of the importance of preserving natural landscapes. This focus on conservation has limited large-scale urbanization and industrial expansion, ensuring that vast areas remain untouched. One of the key reasons for this is the deep cultural respect for the land. For centuries, people here have followed a nomadic way of life that emphasizes living in harmony with nature rather than altering it permanently. Unlike agricultural societies that clear forests for farmland or build irrigation systems to modify landscapes, the nomadic lifestyle depends on the land remaining in its natural state. Herders move with the seasons, allowing pastures to recover and preventing overuse of any single area. This practice has helped maintain the country's vast grasslands, keeping them fertile and sustainable for future generations. Another important factor is the government's approach to land use. Much of the land is considered communal rather than privately owned, meaning it is not sold or developed for private profit. This communal land system ensures that vast areas remain available for herding rather than being divided into farms, industrial zones, or housing developments. In contrast to many countries where land is bought, sold, and transformed into urban areas, here, the majority of land remains open and undeveloped, preserving traditional ways of life. Additionally, environmental conservation policies have played a crucial role in limiting human settlement in certain areas. Recognizing the importance of protecting biodiversity, the government has designated large portions of the country as protected areas, national parks, and nature reserves. These areas are home to unique wildlife, including endangered species that require vast, undisturbed habitats to survive. By restricting construction and economic activities in these regions, the government has ensured that large parts of the country remain empty, serving as refuges for wildlife and maintaining ecological balance. Climate change and desertification concerns have also influenced land use policies. With global temperatures rising and environmental conditions becoming more unpredictable, the country has taken steps to combat desertification and protect its fragile ecosystems. Overgrazing, deforestation, and urban expansion can accelerate desertification, turning fertile land into barren wastelands. To prevent this, policies have been implemented to regulate land use, limit deforestation, and encourage sustainable herding practices. These efforts, while essential for environmental protection, also contribute to keeping the population concentrated in specific areas while leaving much of the country unoccupied. Water conservation is another key aspect of environmental policy. With much of the country experiencing low rainfall and some regions facing water scarcity, careful management of water resources is essential. Large-scale agricultural or industrial projects that require significant amounts of water are often discouraged due to the risk of depleting limited resources. Instead, traditional, low-impact practices like livestock herding are prioritized, further reducing the need for widespread settlement and infrastructure development in rural areas. Tourism has emerged as a sustainable economic alternative to large-scale industrialization. Rather than building factories or intensive agricultural farms, the country has focused on ecotourism, attracting visitors to its vast, untouched landscapes. National parks, cultural heritage sites, and nature reserves draw travelers seeking unique experiences in the wilderness. However, ecotourism is carefully managed to prevent environmental degradation, meaning that infrastructure development is limited to specific zones, leaving most of the land undisturbed. International environmental commitments have also influenced land use decisions. As part of global efforts to combat climate change and biodiversity loss, the country has pledged to protect large portions of its natural environment. Participation in international agreements on conservation, sustainable development, and climate action has reinforced policies that limit large-scale urban expansion. These commitments help ensure that the country's unique landscapes remain intact for future generations, even if it means that much of the land remains sparsely populated. The combination of cultural traditions, government policies, environmental challenges, and international commitments has created a situation where vast areas remain uninhabited. While other nations have prioritized rapid urbanization and industrial growth, this country has chosen a path that values sustainability, conservation, and the preservation of traditional ways of life. This approach has helped maintain one of the world's last great open landscapes, where nature still dominates over human development. Climate is one of the most influential factors in determining where people can live and thrive. In many parts of the world, favorable weather conditions support dense human settlements, agriculture, and economic activities. However, in this country, extreme climate and harsh weather conditions have played a significant role in keeping vast areas uninhabited. The combination of long, brutal winters, short growing seasons, low precipitation, and sudden temperature fluctuations makes survival difficult outside of a few urban centers. One of the most defining features of this country's climate is its extreme cold. Winters can be exceptionally harsh, with temperatures regularly dropping far below freezing. In some regions, it is common for winter temperatures to reach as low as -40 degrees Celsius, -40 degrees Fahrenheit, or even colder. At these temperatures, exposed skin can freeze within minutes, making daily activities a challenge. Snowfall is heavy in many areas, covering the land for months and making transportation difficult. Roads can become impassable due to snow and ice, cutting off rural areas from supplies and essential services. Blizzards and severe winter storms further complicate life in the countryside. Strong winds can create whiteout conditions, making visibility nearly zero and increasing the risk of getting lost in the vast, open landscapes. For nomadic herders, these conditions can be life-threatening, as their livestock may freeze or starve if they cannot find enough shelter or food. Some of the worst winters, known as zuds, bring extreme cold, heavy snow, and ice that prevent animals from grazing, leading to massive livestock losses. These devastating events not only affect rural populations, but also contribute to migration towards cities, leaving even more of the countryside empty. In contrast to the freezing winters, summers can be surprisingly hot, with temperatures soaring above 35 degrees Celsius, 95 degrees Fahrenheit in some areas. The rapid transition from winter to summer happens with very little in between, meaning that spring and autumn are often brief. This sudden shift in temperatures places stress on both people and the environment. The intense summer heat, combined with dry conditions, can lead to droughts and wildfires, making agriculture and settlement even more challenging. One of the most significant challenges posed by the climate is the lack of consistent rainfall. Much of the country experiences low annual precipitation, meaning that water is scarce, especially in desert and steppe regions. Unlike regions with reliable rainfall that can support large-scale farming, here, droughts are common and water sources are often unreliable. Even in areas where rivers and lakes exist, they can dry up during periods of low precipitation, making them unsuitable for long-term settlement. This scarcity of water limits the potential for agricultural expansion, further discouraging population growth in rural regions. The extreme climate also affects infrastructure development. The harsh winter conditions make road maintenance a constant challenge, as freezing and thawing cycles cause pavement to crack and deteriorate. Buildings require special construction techniques to withstand the cold, and heating costs in winter are high, making life in rural areas expensive. In some remote settlements, the difficulty of maintaining infrastructure leads to depopulation as residents move to cities where conditions are more manageable. Wind is another major climatic factor that influences settlement patterns. The vast open steppes and deserts experience strong, persistent winds that can make life difficult. Dust storms and sandstorms are common in certain regions, reducing visibility and damaging structures. In winter, the combination of extreme cold and strong winds makes outdoor work nearly impossible, further discouraging permanent settlement in exposed areas. Another significant impact of the harsh climate is on agriculture. In many parts of the world, farming is the foundation of rural life, providing food and economic stability. However, in this country, the growing season is short, lasting only a few months in many regions. Frost can occur even in late spring or early autumn, making it difficult to cultivate crops reliably. The limited growing season means that only a small portion of the land can be used for farming, and even then, yields are low compared to more temperate regions. Without a strong agricultural base, rural settlements struggle to sustain themselves, leading to further concentration of people in urban centers. Climate change has also begun to impact the region, making extreme weather events even more unpredictable. Rising temperatures have led to increased desertification in some areas, reducing the amount of usable grazing land. At the same time, unpredictable weather patterns have made it harder for herders and farmers to plan for seasonal changes. As climate conditions become more severe, the challenges of living in remote areas grow, reinforcing the trend of low population density. The combination of freezing winters, scorching summers, low rainfall, and extreme weather events makes much of the country's landscape inhospitable for large-scale human settlement. While urban centers have adapted by developing heating systems, infrastructure, and modern conveniences, rural areas remain at the mercy of nature. The difficulty of maintaining a stable, comfortable life outside of these urban areas has led to a concentration of people in a few key locations, leaving vast regions empty. Beyond geography, climate, and economics, cultural and social factors play a crucial role in shaping population distribution. In many countries, traditions and social structures have encouraged urbanization, leading to densely populated cities and towns. However, in this country, cultural norms, historical traditions, and social preferences have contributed to maintaining a low population density, reinforcing the wide, open landscapes that define the nation. One of the most influential cultural factors is the deep-rooted tradition of nomadism. For centuries, people here have lived a nomadic lifestyle, moving seasonally with their herds in search of fresh pastures. Unlike societies that built permanent settlements early in history, this culture has been shaped by mobility, adaptability, and a close connection to nature. Even as modernization has brought changes, the nomadic way of life remains an essential part of national identity. Many families still choose to live in traditional portable homes rather than in permanent structures, allowing them to relocate as needed. This cultural preference for movement over permanence naturally limits the development of large urban centers and keeps the countryside sparsely populated. The value placed on open space and independence is another key factor. In many cultures, people seek to live close together in tight-knit communities, but here, the opposite is often true. Wide, open landscapes are seen as a source of freedom rather than emptiness. Many people prefer to have space, both physically and socially, rather than being confined to crowded cities. Even those who move to urban areas often maintain strong ties to rural life, returning to the countryside whenever possible. This deep appreciation for open space has shaped settlement patterns, ensuring that vast areas remain unoccupied despite the availability of land. Family structure and social organization also contribute to the country's low population density. Unlike some nations where extended families traditionally live together in large households, here, smaller family units are more common, and they are often spread out over large distances. This distribution of families across vast territories prevents the formation of densely packed communities. Additionally, the emphasis on self-sufficiency means that many people prefer to live independently rather than in large, interconnected neighborhoods. Migration patterns have further reinforced these trends. Over the past century, many young people have moved to the capital and other major cities in search of education, jobs, and modern conveniences. While this is a common trend worldwide, in this country, the effects have been especially pronounced due to the already low population density. As younger generations leave rural areas, fewer people remain to sustain traditional settlements, leading to even more depopulation in the countryside. Many villages that once supported small but stable populations have gradually emptied as residents move to urban centers for better opportunities. Education and career opportunities play a significant role in shaping these migration patterns. While traditional herding and rural life still hold cultural importance, modern career paths often require specialized training and access to higher education. Most universities, technical schools, and professional training centers are concentrated in a few key cities, forcing students to relocate for their education. Once they complete their studies, many graduates choose to stay in urban areas, where job opportunities and modern amenities are more readily available. This migration of educated individuals further concentrates the population in cities while leaving rural regions sparsely inhabited. Marriage and family dynamics also influence population distribution. In many countries, marriage often leads to the establishment of new households within or near existing communities. However, here, couples may move frequently based on work, education, or personal preferences. Additionally, the relatively low population means that finding suitable marriage partners in rural areas can be challenging, leading some people to relocate to cities where social opportunities are greater. This gradual movement of people from rural areas to urban centers has contributed to maintaining vast empty spaces across the country. The role of government policies and social services also plays a part in settlement patterns. Urban areas tend to offer better access to healthcare, education, and public services, making them more attractive to families and individuals seeking stability. While efforts have been made to improve rural healthcare and education, many remote areas still lack the same level of services found in cities. This disparity encourages migration to urban centers, further emptying rural regions. Additionally, social welfare programs and economic assistance initiatives are often easier to access in urban areas, reinforcing the trend of population concentration. Religious and spiritual beliefs have also historically influenced settlement patterns. Many spiritual traditions emphasize a connection with nature, solitude, and a harmonious relationship with the land. Some regions hold cultural or spiritual significance, and rather than being developed into major cities, they are preserved as sacred sites. This respect for the land as more than just a resource for human use has played a role in maintaining large open areas, reinforcing a cultural mindset that values balance over expansion. Finally, the perception of rural life versus urban life continues to shape population trends. While modernization has brought new opportunities to cities, rural life is still highly respected and valued. Many people continue to engage in herding, traditional crafts, and rural lifestyles, even as urbanization progresses. However, the balance between modern conveniences and traditional values often leads people to live in both worlds, spending part of their time in the city for work or education but maintaining strong ties to the countryside. This dual lifestyle further contributes to the country's unique population distribution, where vast areas remain largely uninhabited despite economic and technological development. The vast emptiness of this land is not a coincidence, but a result of a unique blend of history, geography, climate, culture, and tradition. Unlike many other nations that have pursued rapid urbanization and industrial expansion, this country has maintained its deep connection to open spaces, nomadic heritage, and environmental preservation. The challenges of harsh weather, limited infrastructure, and economic factors have further reinforced low population density, making large-scale settlement impractical in many regions. Yet this emptiness is not a weakness. It is a defining characteristic. It represents freedom, resilience, and a way of life that has endured for centuries. The wide open landscapes, untouched wilderness, and vast horizons are not signs of neglect, but of a people who have chosen to live in harmony with nature rather than against it. As the world becomes more crowded and urbanized, the preservation of such vast, open spaces becomes even more valuable. This land remains one of the last places on Earth where nature dominates over concrete, where traditions continue alongside modernization, and where emptiness is not a void, but a treasure.